Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 271, Grafted Cluster. A couple of days later, the Golden Road expansion to the westward of Angora City went smoothly underway. The end goal would be reaching the isolated territories there named the Grafted Cluster. These were a collection of small settlements, towns, and villages numbering in the double digits. There wasn't a centralized government that controlled these territories like how the Duke controlled Angora City, but they did have their own local government that kept everything in check. So that means that we can construct the Golden Road there without needing any permission? Michael asked Yuna. That's right. The citizens of these people would love nothing more than to have a viable road for them to traverse, she answered clearly. They have actually submitted a formal request to our family to ask for some assistance to this matter. But you know how it is, without the proper funding, these road projects could never be accomplished. Luckily for them, Michael was in no shortage of gold at the moment. Construction of such a long road may cost a lot of money, but he knew that it would all pay off in the end, just like how business boomed once Angora City became connected to the king's region. Shiina, how's the progress? The white-scaled dragonborn laid down the papers on the table for Michael to see. We are about 67% of the way there, Lord Michael. It will probably take less than a week before we reach the first settlement. They had people working day and night to complete the Golden Road project, made possible through employing talented prospects from the king's region and Angora City combined. So Yuna, those territories in the Grafted Cluster, is there anything I need to prepare? Yuna nodded. There are two major companies located in the Grafted Cluster, Barkus Incorporated and Bullrun Inc., which are ranked number 487 and number 486 respectively. They are both managed by a pair of twins who treat each other more as rivals rather than siblings. They used to have a very good relationship, but one of them branched off and created a new company that rivaled the original one. Now, they are both competing to try and outdo each other in the Golden 500 ranking. Michael was kind of surprised to see that a company ranked in the 400s would be located in such a remote part of the Queen's region. This meant that they were miles and miles better than the Hammerstone Company itself. I guess that's not a good comparison. The Hammerstone Company borrowed the Stone Cold Six from the Hephaestus conglomerate, that's why they were a little bit more powerful than usual. Fudge, are you there? Immediately, a violet slime jumped out of his shadows and landed onto his head. Fudge looked around the room and saw Yuna, immediately diving towards her, completely ignoring Michael. Who's a good ninja? Yuna said, patting Fudge. I am he. Ahem, Fudge. It was only after he coughed a second time did Fudge finally look back at Michael and saluted towards him. At your service, master. Did the shadow orcs find anything about the bastard bandits? He asked casually. Not yet, master. Those scammers are still in their cave hideout and preparing their stuff. Luckily, we already have shadow orcs being spread to all their members. It won't be long before we have them all under surveillance. Michael nodded, satisfied with the awesome work that the shadow orcs were doing. Since the shadow orcs are busy, then I'd like you to personally find out more about these two new companies, Barkus Incorporated and Bullrun Incorporated. Fudge somersaulted out of Yuna's arms and did a superhero landing. As you wish, master. I shall send in my clones to infiltrate their operations and find out what they're hiding in their basements. Don't go too overboard, he warned Fudge, but the slime was already gone. In the very heart of the Grafted Cluster was a small town that was completely divided into two. On one side, the architecture and style of the buildings and structures were made completely out of wood and vines, making for a very earthy and natural vibe to the town. But on the opposite side of that was an entirely different style made out of stone and marble. The architecture was blocky and geometric, which was a complete tonal shift from the natural and curvy style of the opposite side. This was where the headquarters of Barkis Incorporated and Bullrun Incorporated was located. This was where the two brothers created their companies and built it from the ground up before they clashed and split against each other. Right now, a Rebornian messenger stood at the very gates of this town and looked curiously at the contrasting architecture and style of the territory. Beneath his feet was his shadow cast from the sun already at its zenith. Strangely, his shadow seemed to flicker and move unnaturally even though the source of light remained static. "Boss Fudge, I have arrived at the town. I shall now send the letter to the local government here," the messenger whispered to himself. And strangely, his shadow moved up and down, as if nodding. The messenger then entered the town and asked for the directions until he reached the mayor's house. He introduced himself as a Reborn representative here to deliver news from Michael himself. The mayor didn't appear himself, but the letter was successfully delivered, making the messenger's job complete. He quickly got on his horse and rode off back to Angora City. But strangely enough, his shadow seemed to have been left behind in the mayor's house. It slithered through the guards in the front, bypassing the heavy metal doors through the small slits underneath it. Reaching inside, the shadow attached itself to a butler who walked up the winding stairs into the master bedroom. "Mayor," the butler said, knocking on the door, "there is a letter here for you addressed from the Reborn Company." The mayor, a man with quite a large gut from eating good food, opened the door and took the letter from the butler before sitting back down at his desk. He looked at the red wax seal with a distinct R symbol on the front. "This is the real deal," he muttered. But before he could open the letter, his door suddenly burst wide open as two tall, lanky men with vastly different clothes yet extremely similar faces came walking towards the mayor. "Barkis, Bullrun, I was just about to call for you," the mayor said. Barkis raised his sharp chin and put his hands on his clothes made entirely out of leaves and vines. "I heard something interesting came knocking at your door. Reborn? The hashtag 450th ranked company in the world. I would like to see what they have to say." But before Barkis could walk forward and snatch the letter out of the mayor's hand, Bullrun got in the way. "Hold your horses there, brother. I would like to see it first," he said, crossing his arms and showing off his armor made out of heavy stones. The mayor looked flustered as he once again became caught up in the siblings' rivalry. "Either way, Mayor, don't get too caught up in what the contents of that letter will say. I don't believe that a no-name company could reach that rank so fast. There's got to be some kind of conspiracy going on," Barkis said, slamming his fist on the table. This made Bullrun smile. "That I will agree with you, brother." Chapter 272. Divine Slime God. For the twin brothers, seeing the Reborn Company blow past their company ranking seemed almost impossible. They knew how hard they worked to achieve number 487 and number 486 respectively. It took almost 10 years for them, and they had to climb through the ranks one by one to do so. And unlike Christian Hammerstone, Barkis and Bullrun were both the strongest fighters in their own companies. So, they knew that advancing to that rank required really strong fighting skills that not just anybody could obtain. But, didn't you hear that they defeated the Stone Cold Six? What did they call them? The Dragonborns. The mayor was a little bit more apprehensive in calling the newspaper articles as nothing more than rumors. He didn't necessarily believe its authenticity, but he just couldn't completely disregard it either. "It's just a myth," Barkis said, waving his concern. "I have never even heard of that demi-human species before, and frankly, I am kind of worried for them that they will draw the ire of the dragons for using the draconic name even though they aren't part of their lineage." In a rare occurrence, his brother seemed to totally agree. "I have a few friends back in Angora City and even they don't know what truly happened. After all, nobody saw what truly transpired that night, if anything even happened at all," he said confidently. The mayor looked at the letter in his hands hesitating whether he should open it or not. "I'm going to open it," he said. Using a very sharp letter opener, he took out the folded sheet of paper and began reading through its contents. His eyes parsed through the inked words, with his expression showing confusion and disbelief. What is it? The brothers asked simultaneously. They're coming here, the mayor announced. They want to build a road that connects the grafted cluster to Angora City. For free, he emphasized. For free. Barkis immediately swiped the letter from the mayor's hands and read through it himself. They even want to establish a friendly relationship with us. They're promising all sorts of benefits as well. Let me see that, Bullrun said, grabbing the paper too. The mayor nervously began biting on his nails. The prospect of having a serviceable road connecting their cluster to a big capital city like Angora would truly change the economic status of their whole area. It would open up so many opportunities. The mayor was definitely in favor of the agreement. The two brothers could see it in the chubby man's face. Of course, this wasn't favorable to the two companies at all. They needed to keep the monopoly they had in the grafted cluster. Mayor, you better reconsider your choices, warned Barkis. For a decade, we have supported this town and the rest of the settlements with my generosity. Do not hog all the credit, brother. I have done even more for this cluster than your company could ever do in a lifetime. Bullrun shot back. Really? Then why aren't you the ranked #486th company right now? Oh, right, that's me. The two twin brothers began bickering loudly again, entering into a shouting match that annoyed the mayor to no end. He really wanted to accept Reborn's offer. All those stories about having those horseless metal carriages and cheap vegetables tempted him to completely disregard the two brothers' opinions. However, he wasn't that courageous in disobeying them. After all, he had spent all the years of his term as mayor essentially becoming their lapdog. Just then, as the two brothers were busy arguing with each other, the mayor suddenly saw the whole room turn dark. He looked around hurriedly to see himself being engulfed in the shadows, unable to move and shout to warn the brothers. Eventually, all he could see was darkness all around him. What's happening? He shouted. Just then, his whole world shook as a giant ball of violet slime as big as a castle jumped towards him. The colossal slime looked down at the mayor with a bit of a smile on its face. Are you a god? The mayor questioned. Fufufu, yes. Fudge replied, his voice echoing endlessly in the dark void. What do you want from me? Fudge looked up, imitating the grandness of a godlike being. You are destined for a great future. I am? The mayor asked, looking down at his own chubby belly in shame. Of course, Fudge coughed. However, you are now at a fork road in your destiny. One path leads you to depression and despair not just for yourself, but for the whole territory under your hands. But the other path is the complete opposite. It is your true destiny. It will lead you to wealth and prosperity unlike anything you have ever seen. The mayor looked up at the divine body of the slime god in front of him. His eyes showed a glint of hope and longing. What do I have to do? Ho ho ho, Fudge laughed. I think you already know, young man. The Reborn Company, the mayor realized. Fudge's bulbous body suddenly grew two stump-like hands, using them to create a small rift in the darkness, so that the mayor could see the distant image of the two brothers pointing and shouting at each other. The mayor could see what the two brothers were thinking. They were planning on creating a total blackout for the Reborn Company, preventing their products from reaching the territories of the grafted cluster. What should I do? He asked the benevolent divine slime. What is their weakness? What do they hate and desire the most? Fudge asked. Each other, the mayor answered. They want to completely outdo one another. Then the answer is simple. You shall. As the mayor heard the words echo in his mind, the darkness around him began to recess into the walls, returning him back into reality. Mayor. Are you listening? Barkis shouted. The mayor looked at himself and balled up his fist. Remembering the appearance of the slime god gave him a lot of courage. Are you sure you guys want to reject the Reborn Company? He asked them. The twins looked back at the mayor, angry yet intrigued at his words. Why not? I mean, the Reborn Company is the #450th ranked company in the entire world. Imagine what would happen to your companies if it suddenly reported that you guys were able to completely defeat them fair and square. Barkis and Bulren's eyes widened as they began to realize the effects of the mayor's hypothetical question. My company would soar through the rankings, Barkis muttered. I'll finally be able to surpass him, Bulren whispered. The temptation of defeating a 450th ranked company was too great. The twins immediately exited the mayor's house and began preparing their companies for the competition against the Reborn company. Meanwhile, the mayor sighed in relief as he saw the twins leave. He looked up at the ceiling and brought his hands together as a prayer. I hope that is satisfactory for your majesty, he muttered under his breath. Back at Angora City, Michael saw Fudge jump out of his shadows with a giant smile on his face. What's up? Nothing, master. The west branch of the Golden Road should proceed smoothly now. Chapter 273, First Settlement. A few days later, the Golden Road finally reached the first settlement in the grafted cluster. It was just a small village with a little over 300 citizens inside. The locals of the settlement saw firsthand how the Rebornian engineers poured the liquid concrete onto the pathway ditch and watched it harden within just a few hours with the help of a little magic. It completely surprised them, especially as the first few automobiles came riding from the horizon. These trucks carried over all the necessary equipment and products needed to create a base for the Reborn company here in this settlement. Michael even went above and beyond as he planned to create more amenities in this place, such as an underground well to help raise the standard of living in the grafted cluster. After the automobiles arrived, he transported himself over there through his shadows and met with the local leader of the settlement to relay his intentions. Are you the owner of the Reborn company? The hunched old man asked Michael. This kind of surprised him a little bit, seeing as he hadn't even introduced himself yet. But the old man seemed to have known that he was its leader. Yeah. How did you know? The old man smiled and pointed at all the Rebornians laying down their materials from the automobile trucks. They've been looking at you with respectful eyes all this time, he said. That kind of respect can only be reserved for benevolent leaders such as yourself. He was flattered. You've heard about us? The old man nodded. There has been a lot of talk about the new sponsor of Angora City. And despite my ears failing me, I can still hear well enough to have heard about you. Michael looked around and saw the underdeveloped state of the settlement. Most buildings were made out of wood and thatch, the roads were muddy, and there wasn't much foot traffic going around it. They didn't even have a market and only relied on traveling peddlers to get supplies. Can we establish our company here? Build our own infrastructure? The old man nodded and spread his hands. You are very much welcome to do so. I'm planning on building a golden road that connects this place to Angora City. You can travel there in about 3 days through carriage, or just 1 day through our taxi automobile service. He also planned to create a bus station in every territory, allowing for normal people to travel easily to the big cities like Angora. Michael began instructing Kong, the Rebornian engineer chief, to start the construction in the settlement. Their first order of business was to create running water from the aquifer underground. It took them just an hour before it— Whoa! Water! A boy said as the water splashed on the ground from the pipes. The whole population of the settlement celebrated this momentous occasion, thanking the Rebornians by offering them dried deer meat and skinned rabbit fur. The old man approached Michael. This may be presumptuous of me, but there is nothing we would like more than to be under your banner. You want to join the nation of Reborn? Yes, we would all like to, the old man replied with everyone nodding behind him. Michael didn't think it would be this easy. Not even a few hours after they landed in this settlement, and already he had accomplished his goal. He was just hoping to establish the company here, but he ended up gaining another territory. He had Shiina and Yuna take care of all the paperworks, and in just a matter of a few hours, they became official Reborn citizens. Back in the center town of the grafted cluster, the two twins each sat in their respective headquarters and commanded their companies to start a large campaign that spanned the whole Western Territory. Gather all our merchants and our peddlers. I want them all to start going over all the territories near us, selling only Barkis Incorporated products. Sell potatoes, carrots, and even pepper spices at a large discount. And it seemed that his twin brother thought of the same thing. Make sure that the whole market is drowned out by all of our products, Bullrun shouted to his employees. I don't want anyone buying those Reborn products at all. Since they were much more established in the deeper parts of the grafted cluster, their campaign largely worked and increased their overall sales throughout the whole region. Their profits were down, but that was a necessary sacrifice to completely shut down the Reborn company's attempts. However, just a few days after this campaign started, the twins each received terrible news. Sir Barkus, we can't sell anything in the first settlement, his messenger said anxiously. And why is that? They're the ones that need fresh produce from us. Otherwise, they can't survive. The messenger bit his lips. That's the thing, sir. The Reborn company has already arrived there and established a connection with them. That's fine, Barkus said. Just lower the prices some more. I doubt that the Reborn company can bear to lower the prices like we do because they're transporting those goods all the way from Angora City. This is a war that they'll lose. The messenger tried to get the words out of his mouth, but couldn't bear to do so. Sir. The first settlement has already agreed to become part of the Reborn territory. What? Now that the first settlement was part of their territory, Michael decided to implement a lot of new establishments in the territory. Aside from basic stuff like concrete roads and plumbing systems, Michael also created a fun little hot springs-inspired bath for the people to enjoy. And just as Michael thought, this became a really popular spot for the locals. The large improvement in the first settlement eventually reached the next two territories in the grafted cluster, which Michael set his eyes onto next. The Golden Road branched into two paths once again as it reached towards those two places in just a matter of a few days. Those two settlements were a little bit bigger and more advanced than the first settlement. They had proper buildings and infrastructures to be called a town rather than a village. The wet markets in these places consisted of small local businesses who sourced their products from their own homes. Things like butchered pigs, metal pots and pans, and dirted vegetables were all made by their own citizens and sold to other citizens. However, unlike the wet market free-for-all, the Barkus Incorporated store was established in a building that was much more organized than most. Right now, the whole store had signs that showed prices slashed in half. This caused quite a line in the Barkus Incorporated store as people bought their products in a frenzy. However, this all changed when the citizens noticed the flat road being constructed in the distance. It was the famous Rebornians. A few days later, the Golden Road connected to their town and allowed for the automobile trucks to unload all their products onto the general market. Chapter 274. Deviating Ways. The sudden appearance of unique products only found in the King's region like the famous grassweed herb or the phrenic stone completely changed the market landscape of this town. The Reborn company became all the rage within its citizens, buying their products and venturing out to the Golden Road to reach the first settlement in just a few hours. The mayor of this town immediately accepted Michael's offer to establish their own infrastructure in the territory, much to the dismay of the twin brothers. Barkus and Bullrun only found out a couple of days later that their business in these territories almost came to a complete stop. What? How are they creating these roads so damn fast? Bullrun screamed out. And how are they transferring these King's region products so cheaply? The transport and shipping costs of these items should far exceed what they're selling it at. I just don't understand it. Bullrun became so bothered at the current situation that he ended up asking a few of his employees to become troublemakers for the Reborn company. Scare them just enough so that they'll be hesitant to step a foot further into the grafted cluster, he said to his employees. Threaten their merchants and show them your knives. You don't have to hurt them, just make sure they get scared. This would have been a great plan if not for the Reborn company's tremendous defensive capabilities. First of all, Bullrun never knew that there were shadow orcs planted all over his mansion and even under his very feet. They listened and watched for his every move, so Michael and the Rebornians were quickly given notice of what was about to happen. And second of all, those merchants weren't just ordinary people. They were Rebornians with an almost impenetrable defense as well. So when the troublemakers sneaked into the Reborn camping site near the town, they didn't know what they were getting into. They entered into the tents of the Rebornian merchants and pulled a knife near their throats. Leave this place now or else we'll come back to finish the job. However, As soon as the knives were about to reach their throats, an invisible prismatic shield appeared around the Rebornians and repelled the knives away from their hands. "What?" the troublemakers cried out as they saw their knives land in the ground. They stumbled forwards trying to catch it, but when they did, they suddenly realized that they were kneeling in front of a giant pair of feet that emanated a black fire. The troublemakers looked up and saw these humongous orcs looking down at them with red glinting eyes. And as soon as they made eye contact with the orcs, these troublemakers fell into illusions that showed them their deepest and worst nightmares. "H!" they screamed, holding their heads in terror. "Get me out of here!" These troublemakers ran away, never to be seen again. Bullrun tried to get a hold of them a couple of days later, but quickly found out that they disappeared without a single trace. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Bullrun's twin brother was experiencing a very similar meltdown upon realizing the power of the Reborn company. "I guess the rumors are true about those metal carriages," Barkus muttered, biting his nails nervously. "And I thought this concrete thing was just a parlor trick. But I was wrong. It's the only reason as to how they're building the roads so damn fast." Barkus, unlike his twin brother, chose not to get heavy-handed in his attempt to oppose the Reborn company. Instead, he chose a different route. He now wished to study the Reborn company's methods of success to try to implement it into his own company. He could no longer treat this unknown company as a fraud that only bought their way up the rankings. After all, the results were as clear as day. In a matter of a week or so, the Reborn company was able to turn a quarter of the grafted cluster under their influence. The people of this territory hate venturing out of their homes. However, the Reborn company was able to push them out of their comfort zones and influence them to travel through the Golden Road and out into the other territories. He wanted to know how they did that. "Humph. They must be using some kind of magic spell or illusion," Barkus said to himself. "Some kind of love potion, perhaps?" After a few days' worth of travel, Barkus arrived in the first settlement where the Reborn company established their territory. Barkus thought he was prepared for it, but the complete change in the settlement brought him into a complete standstill. The houses made out of wood and thatch were still there, but by its side were these large and towering stone buildings under construction. He was not the first tourist that came into this place. After all, the other Golden Road branches all lead to this place before going over to Angora City. So, there were already Rebornians ready to accommodate all his questions and needs. "Hello, sir. Welcome to the first settlement, a new colony of the nation of Reborn," said a perky young catwoman.
Barkus whispered.
"Is there a place here that everyone loves to visit?" "Yes," replied the catwoman. "Our newly constructed bathhouse is a must-try for all tourists." In Barkus' mind, that place must be where the Reborn company brainwashed their customers. There must have been something in the water to completely turn normal citizens into fanatics of Reborn. "I'm going to detect magic on the water," Barkus whispered to himself as the Catwoman escorted him to the bathhouse. "Enjoy," she said. Barkus entered the steamy room and saw these large stones arranged to make it look like a natural hot spring in the woods. He concentrated on the water, making him look like an awkward man staring at other naked men wearing only a towel. He chose a shallow part of the bath and used the 4-star spell called Detect Water to see if it had been tampered with just as he guessed. Surprisingly, the spell told him that it was just pure, clean water. Confused, Barkus decided to copy what the other men in the bathhouse were doing and completely soaked himself in the steaming pool. As soon as he did, his body felt a relaxing heat that seemed to massage all his tense muscles. All his plans of investigating the hot springs went out the window the moment he submerged his body onto the therapeutic bathhouse. Barkus didn't know it, but he unknowingly spent a full hour in the bathhouse. By the time he dried himself outside, he saw the sun had already set in the horizon. "What the hell do they put in that water?" he asked himself. "Did you enjoy yourself?" asked the Catamount from earlier. Not that much," Barkus flusteredly replied, with his cheeks still red from the bath. "Would you like to join our communal game sessions?" Barkus was visibly confused. We Rebornians have introduced fun board games for everyone to enjoy. Chutes and Ladders, Scrabble, and Uno are widely popular for beginners, but we also have some card games that are popular for experienced gamers. Barkus was led into the newly constructed building into an open space where both Rebornian and local tourists alike gathered in small groups playing different kinds of board games. Although he was invited to play, these things looked childish to him, so he refused to play. But then, he noticed one group playing cards while drinking some kind of frothy yellow water. What's that? Barkus asked. Come join us, my friend. This is beer and poker. Chapter 275, Board Games. Ever since the start of the Golden Road project, Michael noticed that a lot of the Rebornian engineers and the construction workers ended up feeling sad and burnt out at the end of the day. After all, their days and weeks were just made up of going to work, pouring concrete, flattening roads, and waiting for it to dry. Michael forgot that this was a world that didn't have any sort of entertainment for people to enjoy. They didn't have television shows, anime, or even cell phones. To remedy this boredom that they had, he began a social project in which he spread all kinds of board games to see which ones they liked the most. Snakes and Ladders, in particular, were quite famous with the Rebornian construction workers. They played that game while on lunch breaks and during their day offs. However, Lamias weren't quite fond of that for obvious reasons. Turns out they didn't like snakes all that much, probably because of how much they were compared with each other. But they did like the game Hungry Hungry Hippos because it reminded them of their natural habitat near the rivers. The Dragonborns liked Uno, which added up because they were siblings, so the rivalry certainly added up a lot of the fun. As for the engineers, plain old Reborn chess was their choice for entertainment. The spread of board games was received very well within the Rebornian community. And surprisingly, an unintended side effect of this was that even the other territories they conquered adapted board games into their culture as well. For example, the first settlements saw the construction workers playing a lot of Snakes and Ladders. One thing led to another, and soon, they were all playing board games during their free time. However, he knew that board games were fun and all, but sometimes this wasn't enough to satisfy people's need for competition. So, he ended up inventing poker for them as well. Creating the cards was easy enough, but he thought that spreading the rules of poker could be a little bit complicated for people. But, as it turned out, that was not the problem he should have thought of. Instead, people picked up on poker really fast and they became really enthusiastic in playing it all the time. Right now, he was playing poker in the first settlement with Zion, Fudge, Jakku, Grieve, and a red Mankey. And just as they were about to play their first hand of the night, Michael's shadow ascended from the floor and turned into a shadow orc. This orc whispered to Michael and pointed at the man entering the building. Sir, that's Barkus, the leader of Barkus Incorporated. The shadow orc told him before disappearing into the shadows. Michael was quite surprised to see Barkus here in the flesh. From what Fudge told him, it seemed that the two twins weren't quite receptive to their entrance into the grafted cluster. He watched as Barkus looked around the room, with wonder and surprise clearly painted on his face. And with the reddish glow on his cheeks, Michael was sure that the man had just finished a rejuvenating session at the bathhouses. Barkus continued to tour around the tables, peering at the different board games that the Reborn company offered. Everyone had fun and tried to get Barkus to play with them, but he refused. Eventually, the guy ended up approaching one of the tables who were also playing poker. It was Butch and his friends, who were all adopted from the Hammerstone Company a few weeks back. What's that? Barkus asked. Come join us, my friend. This is beer and poker. Butch shouted, his cheeks reddened from being drunk. Barkus seemed really intrigued with the idea of poker. But Michael knew that those guys were practically veterans in the game. They were the first ones that became quite good at poker upon its introduction. It became their go-to entertainment whenever they had guard duties on the Golden Road construction project. Guys, don't bully the man, Michael said to them. Butch immediately sobered up upon seeing him. Boss, we weren't planning on beating the guy for all his money. Just a little bit, he stammered. Barkus' eyes squinted as he looked at Butch. He seemed to have remembered the bald guy from somewhere. Wait, weren't you the leader of the Hammerstone Company in Angora City? Barkus screamed. We buy our armor from your guys. Don't you remember me? Butch looked at Barkus, but seemed to see 3 images of him at the same time. Are you, Hiccup, an orc too? Barkus ignored Butch and then turned to Michael. He called you boss. Then that means, you're the owner of Reborn? Michael shrugged. I guess I am, haha. Nice to meet you, he said, offering his hand. Barkus took a second to steady himself before he hurriedly shook Michael's hand. I wasn't expecting to see you. So young, Barkus muttered, his eyes still clearly doubtful whether he was seeing the real thing. I wasn't expecting to see the owner of the famous #487th ranked company here too. I wasn't, okay, I admit it. I am spying on you, Barkus said, his head hanging low. I thought I would expose all the deceit that your company was doing. But I'm wrong. I haven't seen the people of the first settlement look this happy in all the years of my life. They look satisfied. Michael appreciated the honesty. It looked like this guy wasn't bad at all. Bro Mike, are we gonna play or what? Zion shouted at Michael from the poker table, clearly impatient. Michael looked at Barkus. You want to play some poker? After giving him all the rules he needed to play poker, Barkus joined Michael and the others on the poker table. He was given colorful coins that didn't seem to be any kind of denomination of money that he was familiar with. Those are chips, Michael explained. It's what you use to bet. Barkus nodded. He was smart enough and understood enough of the game to play decently. Dealer, deal the cards. Fudge shouted to the shadow orc on the opposite side of the table. The Orcanine orc looked very distinguished with his black and white suit and well-combed mane. The orc gave each player 2 cards and laid down 5 other cards on the table. The objective of the game was to have the best hand among the given cards on the table. There was a lot of bluffing and guessing involved in the game, which made for some really interesting reactions in the table. I have the best cards on the table. You should all fold and surrender the chips to me, Zion bragged. Ho ho, young one. Mine are the best cards. At least I think so. Grieve took another peek at his cards before affirming his words. Ah yes, indeed. Ugh, I don't have any good cards, but I'll fight it out, Fudge declared, completely misunderstanding the point of the game. While the other players were talking and bluffing against each other, Barkus was fidgeting in his seat, unable to sit properly. It seemed that something was bothering him so much that he couldn't concentrate on playing the game. In the end, he leaned over to Michael and expressed his thoughts. Are you really planning on spreading the Reborn company in the grafted cluster? Aren't you afraid of FlareCorp? Chapter 276. Barkus worries. Ever since Barkus stepped foot into the first settlement, he couldn't help but be engrossed in the culture and lifestyle that Reborn had brought into this territory. He loved the bathhouses. He loved the very welcoming and accommodating Rebornians who helped him without any complaints or expectations of rewards. And he loved that people were enjoying and playing board games together in one room. It was the kind of camaraderie and friendship between people that he had never seen before. And even though he had never visited other Reborn territories, it was easy to guess that it probably had the same vibe and culture as the first settlement. In fact, from the stories he heard, it seemed that those territories were much better than he could have ever thought possible. He realized that what Reborn brought was something precious. Could not be replicated by him or anyone else even if he tried. However, he just couldn't help but feel that it was a waste. It was clear that Michael and the Reborn company were planning on expanding their market reach and their territories all the way into the Queen's region. But Barkus couldn't help but think that this was a mistake. Why couldn't Reborn just stay in this territory and protect what they already have? In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the inevitable future when the Reborn company eventually butts head with the infamous FlareCorp group that had just recently conquered Batchrock Town. If they stopped advancing today, then they could have maybe 1 or 2 years of peace and prosperity before FlareCorp tries to invade Angora City. At least by then, they could have created some kind of defensive structure to try and withstand their onslaught. But by continuing to advance in the Queen's region, Michael would only meet FlareCorp a lot sooner than expected. Barkus just couldn't understand it. The Reborn company had a lot of potential from what he could see. He couldn't just stand still and watch it fall onto an endless abyss. Ever since the possibility of FlareCorp invading the grafted cluster came about, I have been reading and trying to find out more about them. And what I saw terrified, Barkis said. They are fearless and relentless in their pursuit. They will not stop until they get what they want. If they conquer a territory, they will impose an iron rule. If the government opposes them, then that government will be gone. If a duke or a royal goes against their wishes, then they are disposed of. If a company is threatening their total domination, then that company is ripped apart. And if the citizens themselves are defying them, Barkis' words trailed off. Their army is built out of thousands of soldiers who go through hellish training from their youth. They have equipment that would make adventurers go green with envy. Even their top officers are known to be masters of their own weapons. And at the very top of the chain of command is a man from a very powerful family. He is a direct heir of the Oscorp conglomerate, and he is using FlareCorp as a way to try and compete to become the main successor of FlareCorp. And it's working. He's slowly going up the line. Barkis became more and more disheveled as he spat out the words in his mind. "Aren't you afraid?" he asked Michael. But after all those terrifying words of warning, Michael just smiled. "I want to build a world of comfort," he answered. "I know that I can make a change. Real change. And there is nothing here in this world that can or will stop me." Barkis looked at the 12-year-old child and saw a sense of boundless confidence in his eyes. It was pure. He could see that Michael truly believed the words that he said. He meant it with the true fullness of his heart. And for some reason, Barkis started to believe him. He didn't know why he got this feeling, but somehow he started to have faith in Michael. "Ha ha ha. That's right. Bro Mike. Tell him," Zion cheered. "I'll punch those Blair Borps until their noses bleed silly. Ho ho ho. I don't know how many times I have seen armies greater than FlareCorp tumble and die because of one single man. Maybe a lot. Maybe a little. I don't know because I don't remember ho ho ho." Grieve laughed out loud, with his hoodie falling backwards and letting Barkis see his true appearance. "A skeleton?" Barkis screamed out. "Ho ho ho, yes indeed. I am just a lowly skeleton. But I can agree with young Zion here. FlareCorp is no problem. Ho ho ho." Fudge couldn't help it anymore and jumped onto the table, flipping the cards face side up and toppling everyone's chips. "Ha! Should I have my shadows kill that FlareCorp guy right now so that we can finally play the game?" Meanwhile, Barkis couldn't help but stare at everyone as if they were all crazy. They were treating FlareCorp as nothing more than a second-rate company. He couldn't understand where they got all this confidence from. They have a whole army, you know? And their officers are the equivalents of high-tiered knights. Barkis shouted. "Don't worry, we have this guy," Zion said, pointing at the evolved red Hobmankey sitting meekly at their table. This particular red Hobmankey was one of the mankeys that Michael recruited from Angora City. He previously worked for the Knights as a janitor, but after his awakening, became the current leader of a platoon in the Reborn army. Under Grief's tutelage, the red Hobmankeys were constantly going through hellish training and practice just to become competent soldiers in the undead general's eyes. Of course, Michael implemented modern health and training techniques such as proper protein intakes, proper sleep and recovery, and also progressive overload of work intensity to maximize their growth. Although the red Hobmankeys didn't have a chance against the Dragonborns individually, they would definitely put up a fighting chance against them while in a group. Even just 10 of the red Hobmankeys served as proper sparring partners of Zion. They were so good that Zion ended up inviting the platoon leader to come play poker with him, which was why he was here right now. "We're still improving, but we will do our best," the red Mankey answered. Michael turned to Barkis. "As you can see, we're ready for a fight." Barkis was still reeling from the shock at their indifference, but chose not to question it any further. "Now, let's play poker," Fudge shouted. And soon, the group restarted the game with a fresh new set of playing cards. Right now, there was a standoff against Michael, Zion, and the red Hobmankey. All three of them were betting all of their chips for this final turn of the cards. It was clear that they all thought that they had the best hand in play, so much so that they were willing to bet everything they had and more. "Bro Mike, I'll bet 10 hours of washing dishes," Zion shouted to his opponents. I'll do the same, whispered the red monkey. Michael smiled at his two opponents. Fine. I'll bet a single customized skill for this hand. All the Rebornians, whether they were playing snakes and ladders, Scrabble, or chess, turned towards Michael once he said those words. He was offering a free skill. Meanwhile, Barkus looked around, confused as to why everyone acted so seriously all of a sudden. Skill. Chapter 277, just like that, a skill given. Barkus looked at all the Rebornians around him. Surely they weren't talking about the skill, right? After all, that was an inherent power that people have since their birth and only naturally awakened during the course of one's life. It wasn't supposed to be wagered or given away like it was some sort of coin. Really, bro Mike? Yosha, I'll be getting that 4-star shadow transportation that you guys have. I don't want to sit in a carriage for weeks on end, Zion said, his eyes filling with competitive fire. Even the red Hobmonkey couldn't help but gulp as he began to think about the skill that he was going to get once he won. Oh, this is a really high-stakes game, one of the spectators said. I want a skill of my own too, but I need to work a few more months before I can get an allocated spot in the boss time. Now that the nation of Reborn grew to the size of about 30,000 citizens and more, Michael couldn't simply just give out any kind of customized skill for the Rebornians anytime they wanted. Back when there were only thousands of them, he gave away skills like it was bronze coins. But now, he was a little bit more conservative in his gift bestowal. If he didn't, then he would have to spend a lot of hours every day giving skills to Rebornians. So, he implemented a merit-based system for skills. Once they worked hard enough to progress the nation of Reborn, then they were entitled with a one-on-one session with him where they could wish for any customized skill they wanted. This became quite a good motivator for the workers, so Michael began to implement it with the other amenities in the nation. For example, people could get mithril artifacts, a year's supply of beer, or even a house and lot in the parched lands all through merit as well. Of course, the most coveted prize that anyone wanted was the customized skill. It was a total game changer for people who wanted to improve their skills in their field, which helped them gain more merit and so on and so forth. So, when he offered a skill as a bet, all the Rebornians were intrigued. Dealer, show the cards, Zion enthusiastically shouted, banging his fists on the table. The shadow orc then turned the 5 cards on the table into a face-up position, showing their value. Ha! Zion jumped, showing his 2 cards to Michael. Bro Mike, I got a 2-pair combo. He showed his cards, and the dealer confirmed that his 2 cards were definitely the same as 2 of the 5 cards in the table, making 2 pairs. Sorry, but I got 3 of a kind. Michael showed his 2 cards, a 5 of hearts and a 5 of clubs. And coincidentally, one of the cards on the dealer's table also had a 5 of diamonds, creating a combo of 3 5s. Ah! Zion slumped back to his seat, defeated. Now, there was just one other person on the table who still hasn't shown his cards. Can you beat a 3 of a kind? The dealer asked the red Hobmonkey. He looked shy to show his cards at first, but he eventually turned them over and showed a 2 of clubs and a 3 of diamonds. Those 2 cards seemed unimpressive at first, but when combined with the 5 cards at the dealer's table, showed a completely different outcome. The dealer had a 4 of hearts, a 5 of diamonds, and a 6 of clubs. The cards numbered 2 through 6 created a straight combo. The red Hobmonkey won. Whoa! Congrats, man! I won. The red Hobmonkey couldn't believe his luck. Congrats, Michael said to him. As promised, I owe you a skill. What do you want? The red Hobmonkey didn't even know what to say. A few seconds later, some of his Mankey friends in their platoon came rushing over to his side and began bombarding him with requests. Dude, you should get a cool sword skill like Sir Jaku with his lightning slashes. The 4-star electric slice should be good, one of them said. No, he should get a shadow skill. Aren't the orcs so cool with their ninja skills? The red Hobmonkey listened to everyone's request, but none of them struck his fancy. He wanted something different, something that would help the platoon as a whole. I have a request, he said to Michael. Boss, I want to talk with my team without speaking, like telepathically. Upon hearing this, Barkus couldn't help but think to himself that there was no such spell like that available in the world. certainly not here in the backwoods side of the Queen's region. He thought Michael would immediately deny the request, but Mycroft instead closed his eyes for a second before nodding. Okay, Michael said. One customized 3-star skill military talk. Coming right up. He raised his hand and immediately, a bright white light appeared on the red Hobmankey's chest. It blinded everyone for a second before subsiding. What happened? Barkis asked out loud. But then, he noticed that the red Hobmankey's eyes widened. He looked at the other Mankeys, who all raised their hands and created some sort of gestures at the very same time as if they were talking to each other. No way, he muttered. Are they telepathically communicating through a skill? Michael nodded. Yeah. I gave him a skill that allows him to become like a radio signal. Oh, I guess you don't understand that, huh? It creates an invisible connection with his platoon members that allows them to speak with their minds. But, a skill impossible, but how? Barkis couldn't bring the words out of his mouth. Shock wouldn't be the right word to describe his feeling at the moment. Distressed was more like it. He couldn't help but look at Michael and the Rebornians differently now. After the bet was over, everyone turned back to their own games and played like normal as if nothing even happened. He couldn't understand why he was the only one who seemed to be stupefied at the sight of Michael creating a skill out of nowhere and giving it to someone in just a blink of an eye. Was this normal for them? A 4-star skill given just like that? Before Barkis could even formulate a question, he saw a dark shadow ascend from the ground behind Michael. Slowly, it morphed into the form of an orc, similar to the one dealing the cards on their table. The orc bowed to Michael. Boss, the bandits are finally on the move. They have positioned themselves on top of the valleys near the Golden Road halfway from Angora City to the first settlement. Barkis heard their conversation and couldn't help but speak out his thoughts. Wait, are those bandits wearing black handkerchiefs around their necks? The orc looked at Michael first, asking him for permission to talk. Once he was given a nod, he faced Barkis and nodded. Yes. They are led by a man that carries around a curved knife made out of reinforced obsidian. Barkis gasped, realizing who it was. That's Sleazy, from the Bastard Bandits. He's famous for leaving behind only empty carriages and pooled blood in his wake. You have to retreat your merchants now. Chapter 278. Ambushing an ambush. Damn. They struck while the sun was gone with no help in sight. If they're in the middle of Angora City and the first settlement, it'll take at least 3 days before anyone could send reinforcements. Barkis gritted his teeth. I have been victim to this kind of scheme one too many times. He then looked at Michael and realized something. If you were able to find this out, then this means you have a way to inform your merchants about what's coming. What if you take a detour? But strangely enough, he was the only one who seemed to be panicking at the situation. Why aren't you saying anything? He asked Michael. Are you not worried that your merchants will get robbed? Michael shrugged. To be honest, my orcs have been monitoring those bandits for a long time now, and I am planning not to get involved in it because I want the Golden Road to sustain itself. Barkis looked at Michael. You're testing the limits of the Golden Road? Yeah, Michael replied. In the future, there will be a lot of other merchants traveling the road. I need to make certain that they wouldn't have to be worried about thieves robbing them during their sleep. This was inconceivable to someone like Barkis. Michael seemed extremely confident with the abilities of his men, with no doubt whatsoever. What are you planning? Michael then turned to the red Mankey sitting at the poker table, with the other red Mankeys still congratulating him for getting a new skill. Them. Barkis looked at the 10 or so monkey-like demi-humans gathered near the poker table. Although they seemed a little bit different from their normal species, there was no doubt that they were the red Mankeys infamous in the Queen's region. As far as Barkis could recall, red Mankeys had no talent for magic at all. They were the lowest-ranked demi-human in the entire world. And somehow, Michael entrusted the security of his fortune to them. It was unbelievable. Ho ho ho, I hope that you keep my musings in mind while dealing with those no-gooders, Greaves said to his students. Remember my first rule. What was it again? Ho ho, even I don't remember. Tsk tsk tsk. I'll be sorely disappointed if you guys mess this up. Zion warned the red mankeys. Ugh. If only my sis has me on dishwashing duty tonight, I totally would have joined you guys. My juniors, Fudge declared, jumping on each red mankey's head one by one. You have been blessed by the good ninja. Go forth and deal with those baddies. After getting some slightly effective pep talk from them, the leader of the red mankeys, codenamed Radio Man, faced Michael with a determined face. We are ready, boss. Please deploy us. Sure. Michael nodded. Hey Barkus, you want to go see it? Barkus looked at Michael. See what? And before he could even ask again, he saw Michael's shadow lengthen and reach towards his own feet. And before he knew it, he saw an entire world of shadow ascend from the ground and encase him in endless darkness with no depth whatsoever. A nauseating feeling overcame Barkus' senses, with his stomach churning upside down. He had to kneel on the ground and restrain his vomit before the shadow walls descended back into the floor, showing a completely different environment. 1 second they were at the first settlement recreational building, and the second after that, they were at an open space with nothing but the starry skies above them and an endless flat plain with large boulders and plateaus littered everywhere. Barkus forced himself up, wiping the drool off his mouth. What happened? Where are we? He asked. He looked around and saw a perfectly straight road parallel to the horizon going from left to right. We're in the middle of the Golden Road, Michael answered. On our west here is headed to Angora City, while on the right leads back to the first settlement. Beside him was Michael and the 10 or so red hobmankeys, who didn't seem to be fazed at all from the sudden transportation that had just happened. Teleportation. Not just any teleportation, but long range and multiple targets too. Michael ignored Barkus' surprised expression and turned to the red hobmankeys. Are you all ready for your first mission? He asked them. If you are successful in repelling the bandits, then I will endow upon you a proper name to call your troops, the very first squadron in the Reborn army. The red hobmankeys looked at each other with excitement. Their eyes still showed a bit of nervousness, but there was a hidden fire within them that burned ever so brightly. Okay, if you're ready, take out your uniforms and do your final preparations, he said to the hobmankeys. They began reaching out into their shadows, taking out these gears and garments that would look extremely familiar to those who lived on modern Earth. The red mankeys adorned themselves in these beige and brown shirts and leggings, completely covering themselves with something that blended within the environment of the plains. They wore camouflage army combat uniforms. Michael had these especially designed for the first group of the Reborn army. And of course, Michael wouldn't forget the most important part of their attire. The weapons. These red mankeys were all talented in the blade. So, Michael had military knives made out of mithril artifacts attached to their belts for easy access. And as the red hobmankeys were finishing their preparations, Barkus suddenly looked out into the distance. There was a fast-rolling automobile coming directly from the west. The large R symbol painted on its side made it clear that this was Reborn property. It was only then that Barkus connected the dots. This place. This is where the ambush is taking place, he whispered urgently. Yup. And those are our ambushers, Michael said, pointing to the other side of the road where a stone boulder was barricaded right in the middle of the path. Just behind the obstruction were these men numbered in the 20s who covered their faces with black handkerchiefs. Yet, their bloodlust and their greed was still spilling out of their masks. One of those men looked different from the others. His posture was intimidating. He wielded a weapon blacker than the night itself with no regard for his own safety, licking its blade just for the fun of it. That's sleazy, Barkus realized. They're gonna stop the automobile. And just like he guessed, as soon as the driver in the truck saw the boulders in the road, he immediately stepped on the brakes. A high-pitched noise screeched out of the vehicle as it skidded to a stop. The black handkerchiefed bandits strolled out of their hiding spots with swagger in their steps. They had confidence. Look what we have here, boys. Wow. A real-life automobile right in front of our very eyes, Sleazy said, pointing his knife at the driver. Oh, just the metal alone from this thing could set us up for a year, one of the bandits said. Are you kidding me? A horseless carriage like this can fetch for a whole lot more. Meanwhile, the driver of the automobile got out of his car and approached the bandits without even a sense of urgency in his eyes. "Oh look, a yellow monkey," Sleazy said. "I suggest you surrender now, my man, or else you'll have to change your fur to red."
Chapter 279, Bandit escrime.
Sleazy and the bandits raised their knives, twirling it in their hands and showing off their mastery over the weapon. With 20 of them surrounding the lonesome Rebornian driver, they knew that it wouldn't take much pressure to scare him, especially since he was only a yellow monkey. However, they didn't expect the driver to actually give them the keys to the truck so easily. "Here," he said casually, tossing the keys to Sleazy. "Take them if you dare." Sleazy's eyebrows narrowed, suspicious as to why this demi-human looked so confident in the face of 20 bandits. "Open the truck," Sleazy said to his bandits, tossing the keys. In his mind, there was probably a bomb stashed somewhere inside the metal container that would be triggered upon opening. That must have been the reason for the driver's nonchalance. Once the bandits got a hold of the keys, they quickly rushed over to the truck. However, their excitement quickly died down once they realized they had no idea how to use these keys and where to even put them. The bandits poked and prodded the key all over the metal vehicle, unsuccessful in all their attempts. After a while, Sleazy got impatient and ordered the driver to personally open the metal container. "No funny business," he warned the driver. But the driver had no intention of doing so. He simply looked down at his own shadow, making him feel safe and secured. He used the keys and opened the back container of the truck, showing the bandits all the products stored inside. Once Sleazy was sure there were no bombs about to go off, he boarded the truck and marveled at all the loot he had just taken control of. There were crates and crates full of shiny, metallic armor devoid of any scratches or dents. Sleazy began going through the crates, inspecting the quality and make of these equipment to see their worth. His eyes widened as he realized what he held in his fingers. His usually steady hands started to shake with excitement. The other bandits eventually jumped up onto the truck and saw what Sleazy had been so stunned by. They began picking up chest plates, boots, and helmets. "No way. This is dwarven make." Not only that, but there's raw Damascus steel here. In the bandits' eyes, this was even better than gold coins. After all, gold coins can be exchanged for anything. However, dwarven equipment could only be acquired in the black market. And even then, the quantity available there was only a very paltry amount. Even just a single crate in this truck could only be acquired once a year in the black market. And there were tens of these crates here. "Looks like we hit the motherlode here, boys," Sleazy exclaimed. The rest of the bandits cheered and shouted. They began to pick out whatever equipment they fancied, sometimes clashing with other bandits and getting into an argument. Sleazy let them sort their own problems out. This was normal for them. But then, he noticed that all of them were inside the trucks. No one was outside watching the Rebornian driver. "You idiots!" Sleazy screamed, rushing out the truck. But when he looked around, the yellow Hobman key was nowhere to be found. In the endless flat plains, the driver seemed to have disappeared from thin air without any trace of his presence. "Where did he go?" he screamed, his voice echoing back endlessly. There was something suspicious going on. The other bandits were either too stupid or too greedy to even think of this as a problem. As long as they obtained all these treasures, then they didn't care about a single yellow man key. "TSK. Fine, load up all these crates into our carriages," he said to the bandits. "Damn. If only I knew how to drive this thing, we wouldn't have to go through all that trouble." The bandits enthusiastically began to unload all the crates full of dwarven equipment and Damascus steel. But as soon as the first crate landed on the ground, Sleazy suddenly felt the skin on his arms turn up. He sensed the presence of dangerous people. "You have made a grave mistake. This is property of the Reborn Company." The bandits were startled, immediately dropping the heavy crates back onto the ground. They reached for their knives and brandished it in the air, looking around for the source of that voice. They realized that there were about 10 individuals surrounding them and the truck. They didn't know where they came from. They seemed to have appeared from out of nowhere, unnerving the bandits. Sleazy squinted his eyes as he recognized the unique faces of these individuals. "Red mankeys," he said, chuckling. His demeanor quickly changed from wary to lax in a matter of a few seconds upon figuring out their species. They wore strange uniforms, but he would recognize that striking red fur anywhere. "Surrender now and your sentences will be lessened," the red mankey said to Sleazy. "Ha ha ha! Funny joke? I never knew you guys were comedians." "I am serious," said the red mankey. "First violation. Stopping an authorized Reborn vehicle without permission. That's 1 to 2 years in prison. Second violation. Attempting to steal Reborn products. That's 5 years minimum. And third violation, which is the most grievous of all crimes. Threatening the life of a Rebornian. That's 15 years in prison." The bandits looked at the red mankeys before, one by one, they began to laugh and jeer at the ridiculous situation they found themselves in. "Ha ha ha! Are you sure you're not comedians?" Sleazy asked, clutching his belly from laughter. "What are you gonna do? There's 20 of us and 1, 2, 3, 10 of you only." "And that's enough," the red mankey muttered. Sleazy shook his head and gestured for his bandits to attack. One bandit licked his knife before rushing towards the nearest red mankey. He thrusted his knife, aiming for the throat. Just then, the red mankey soldier parried the knife with his own knife, creating sparks in their blades upon collision. The bandit's eyes widened, not expecting the mankey to push him back. Just then, the red mankey pushed his weapon upwards, making the bandit lost his grip on his knife. Before he could even react, the red mankey took his hand and twisted it behind his back, making him scream out in pain. "Grah!" And in a blink of an eye, the bandit felt himself fall to the ground with both of his hands crossed behind his back. He only heard the sound of clinking metal before he found himself cuffed by the red mankey. "One bandit down," he reported. 2 other bandits flanked the red mankey from behind, hoping to free their comrade from his grasp. However, the soldier seemed to have eyes on the back of his head as he ducked and avoided their lunges. With a swift kick through their legs, the 2 bandits lost balance and toppled on top of each other. Before they could get up, they felt their arms twisted into a knot before getting cuffed by the same red mankey. The soldier stepped on top of the stacked bandits and looked at Sleazy. 3 down. In one fluid motion, the 3 bandits were taken down and neutralized. The bandits stopped laughing. They didn't even see what happened. But for Michael, who was watching everything unfold from a vantage point on top of a plateau, this was just basic martial arts. Specifically, this was Krav Maga, a fighting style that he implemented onto the red mankey soldiers that increased their knife and grappling skills tremendously.
Chapter 280. Monkeys v bandits.
Sleazy eyed the red mankeys with a little bit more caution once he saw 3 of his men get put down in a matter of a few seconds. "TSK. Don't get scared of them," he shouted at the bandits. "We have the number advantage. Just do as we've always done." The bandits screamed at the top of their lungs and began to rush towards the red mankey soldiers. Their knives began to glow with the power of mana as they unleashed their physical art spells. Their powers reached the heights of 3-star fighters. Their attacks were made up of basic scrolls they stole from merchants, yet their execution of the spell was nothing less than deadly. One bandit slashed his knife to the red mankey's neck, with his blade creating sharp crescent waters that launched towards its target. Another bandit beside him completely disregarded the water crescent and rushed alongside it. This was a tactic that overwhelmed their opponents. Yet somehow 2 other mankeys came in at the right time for support. One deflected the water crescent, and one clashed with the rushing bandit. The original red mankey used this opportunity and rushed forward, with dust exploding behind him, and attacked the bandit who released the water crescent. He used the 2-star Krav Maga skill, Torpedo Elbow, twisting his torso and creating tremendous acceleration for his elbow. The bandit ducked and used his knife to strike back at the red mankey's elbow, using water pump to induce a powerful repelling force against the elbow strike. However, an invisible prismatic shield manifested around the red mankey, destroying the water particles from the bandit's knife. Without the repelling force, The bandit was forced to use his arms to defend against the red monkey's elbow. The bandit felt his whole world shake upon impact, with his arms completely shattered from the elbow. Unfortunately for him, the red monkey grabbed his head and pushed it down for a perfect delivery of a 2-star knee bomb. The bandit lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Once his job was done, the red monkey immediately rushed towards another bandit to help out his fellow soldier. The bandits may have the numerical advantage, but the red monkeys were somehow able to fluidly exchange and cooperate with each other without much friction. If one red monkey was just a moment away from being lacerated by 2 bandits coming with a knife, 3 more red monkeys would come at the perfect time and give support, repelling the 2 bandits before returning to their original fight. It was as if they were communicating with each other without talking. This was a very frustrating fight for the bandits, as they felt like they were fighting against 3 times the actual amount of red monkeys present. And it wasn't just their cooperation that made this a hard fight for the bandits. It was also their hard-hitting skills that seemed to come with endless combos. If their kick failed to land, they would pivot and punch instead. And if that didn't work, they would feint a kick before using the bandit's off-balance to tackle him to the ground. Each and every one of their moves were powered by a 2-star or a 3-star spell, creating a much more devastating attack. Where the hell did these monkeys come from? Sleazy shouted out. Aren't they a new company? How did they get these spells? Their fighting style was too specific and too specialized for it to be a basic spell purchased in the public market. This meant that their spells must be something that the Reborn company made themselves. But that wasn't possible. As far as he knew, the Reborn company should only be a few years old at this point. It would take at least 4 decades to develop and perfect these kinds of unique spells. Damn it! They tricked us. Sleazy gritted his teeth. They must specialize in magic formulation as well. I thought they just developed armor and weapons. Sleazy watched as one by one, bandits fell to the ground unconscious. By now, their numbers were completely even, which meant that it wasn't long before they were subdued. In a moment of self-preservation, Sleazy slowly backed away from the fight. He quickly turned around and raced to the truck's front seat. His plan was to run away from this place as fast as possible. Yes, he would abandon the thieves, but he would be able to escape with the treasures from this truck as well. Surely, the boss would forgive him once he presented this loot to him. However, faced with the unfamiliar dashboard of the truck, he remembered that he was completely clueless on how to drive an automobile. He tried to smack the wheel just like a horse to make it run. Beep. Sleazy was startled, not expecting the horn to sound off. You can't run away. Suddenly, Sleazy saw the leader of the red monkeys appear on the front seat of the truck, just beside him. He immediately lunged with his obsidian knife, but the red monkey deflected it upwards with his own knife. Their weapons pierced through the roof, with the 2 fighting to push each other's knives. Sleazy smiled. I'm not like those shrimps. He pushed the red monkey's knife, creating a large gash on the ceiling of the truck, before being pushed down towards the soldier's neck. I'm powerful, Sleazy declared. With the knife just inches away from his neck, the red monkey used his other hand to take out something from his pockets. With the gold and violet wrapper torn from the top, the red monkey was free to take a bite out of the chocolate bar. Suddenly, a new force erupted from the red monkey's knife, allowing him to push Sleazy's knife back towards him. What? How? Sleazy screamed. With the red monkey's newfound strength, he began to fight back against Sleazy's attacks. Sleazy gritted his teeth and pulled his knife back before lunging it back towards the red monkey's shoulder. The red monkey tried to parry the knife, but found that his knife merely passed through the obsidian weapon. It was an illusion. The real knife was lunging towards the red monkey's neck. But just at the very last second, the red monkey moved back, letting the obsidian knife pierce through the leather seat of the truck. Tisk! Sleazy muttered, pulling back his knife out of the chair. The red monkey used this chance to leap towards Sleazy in the driver's seat, making this a melee fight. He tried to grapple the bandit, grabbing the seatbelt to try and strangle him. Python constrictor? The red monkey exclaimed, with his mana pouring through to the seatbelt and reinforcing it with more power. Sleazy felt his neck constrain, struggling to pull the red man key off himself. In an act of desperation, he used the 4-star spell Slice and Dice to cut through the seat belt at the risk of his own neck getting cut. Blood poured out of his neck from a flesh wound, but Sleazy didn't mind. He immediately tried to skewer the red mankey's stomach, with the demi-human having no chance to escape. The red mankey saw the threat and immediately stepped foot on the gas pedal, with the truck accelerating from 0 km/h to 40 km/h in a matter of a few seconds. The sudden acceleration pushed Sleazy's seat backwards, allowing the red mankey to barely avoid the knife. With the demi-human on top of him, Sleazy was about to be defeated by a swift elbow meteor directed on his head. He kicked and squirmed, turning the wheel quickly to the left and causing the entire truck to skid sideways. One of the wheels ran over a stray rock on the road, causing the entire truck to tilt sideways, with the momentum finally toppling the truck on its side. With the car crashed, Sleazy used this chance to try and escape. He punched through the windshield, shattering the glass into a million pieces. He began crawling out of the truck, with blood pouring out of his forehead. He dragged his own— Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.